first off, who all has attended Label before, like last year? Okay, so some of you may remember me from last year. I did a presentation as part of the contest called Words. I got a lot of feedback. It was really good. I think that might be why Brian invited me back. So tonight I'm going to just delve a little bit more into that story and kind of how it related to my mental health challenges and then how I became successful after, dealing with that all my life. So for those who were not there last year, I'll just reintroduce myself. As you see, my name is Damon, and I've really become a local mental health advocate here in Salt Lake City. I've been back in Salt Lake for about 5 years now. Love it. This has been home. I've gone for about 10 years. But really, most of my life I've been dealing with mental illness. So I really started dealing with those demons probably in my early 20s. And over the years, it's led me through a lot of different struggles and challenges, from my actual health to jobs to relationships, things like that. So I'm going to share a little bit about that tonight, and then also kind of how I broke that cycle. So really this talk is called Breaking the Cycle, and it's my personal struggles with mental health. So it all started back when I was about 21 years old. I was diagnosed with a rare disease called POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Yeah, I didn't understand what the doctor said the first time. It took me several months to realize, what the hell are you talking about? And right now it's kind of interesting though, because it is a very rare medical condition, but they're now actually finding that a lot of people that have long COVID are getting diagnosed with it or other forms of dysautonomia. So it's kind of interesting because I was originally a research patient when it was really rare. So some of that research is now helping those patients, and I feel terrible for them because those first few years were devastating to my life. But I also love the fact that now there's a lot more research being done now that there's more patients. So that disorder really causes some symptoms like brain fog, migraines, and fainting spells. If I stand up for about longer than 2 minutes, I'm not going to be standing up anymore. So, if I ever do pass out, just don't worry, I'll be back in a minute. So, really, lost my notes. So, having that, it led to multiple hospitalizations. Originally, of course, that was mainly due to the dysautonomia, passing out, and brain fog, migraines, all those different symptoms. There's a bunch of them. But it wasn't long before I had my first trip to the University of Utah to the psych ward. The fact that I was sick, I didn't know if I'd ever work again, what was going to happen, just really started me down a path of a mental health crisis. During that time, I actually had several mental health breakdowns, a few suicide attempts that hospitalized me for a while. Essentially, I was really giving up on life. What am I going to do? I can't even stand up for 2 minutes. How am I going to work? How am I going to have friends? How am I going to have a relationship? It really led to the loss of work and those relationships and friends, and it was honestly a beginning of an endless cycle. And I think anyone that has mental health struggles or addiction struggles knows that it is a cycle. It's something that you have ups and downs, and it continues and goes. So it ended up leading me to becoming homeless. And that was, really a lot due to my bipolar and just major fights with my dad's girlfriend. I was, not getting along well with her. I could always go back home, but honestly, living on the streets was sometimes felt better than that. May have been true. It might have just been my, crazy thoughts in my head of, oh yeah, this is fine. You're living under the bridge on 4th South rather than sleeping at home, so you don't have to deal with Peggy. And that cycle just continued. I'd go home for a while, me and her would have a fight. I'd disappear back to the streets for another 6 months, end up in the hospital, ended up in jail a couple times, for trespassing, things like that. So one of the biggest challenges in mental health is really that never-ending cycle. You think you're doing well, and then you have a mental break, and if you're working, you say, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to work for a couple weeks. I'm going to be locked up in the loony bin. You're not going to have that job very long. So it's a really, really hard cycle to break. It leads to other issues, jail time, repeated hospitalizations, homelessness, drug use, substance abuse, and it's really super difficult. And part of that is also that there's such a stigma around those, mental illnesses, and there's a lack of health care in our country, and there's not really a great support structure. There are some organizations out there that can help do that, but it's very rare and they're hard to find. So my cycle really continued on for years. I moved from place to place. Like I mentioned, I just came back to Utah 5 years ago. I had been in Michigan for a few years, ended up in Oregon for a while with my brother. And it was really just because I would start to stabilize for a minute, there'd be a break, and that would then lose my job, end up on the street, and that cycle just continued again. So over, the time, I would hold a job for maybe 6 months. I went through dozens of them from the time I was, 20 until recently. I went to, probably a different job every year, if I worked during the year. And that, of course, led to all those other issues. You don't have a job, you can't pay rent, you can't even afford to live with friends, you're going to be homeless on the street, now you can't afford to eat, now you can't afford medical care, now you're getting more sick again, back in the hospital. As you see, it just keeps going on and on. Anyone relate to that? Like that just constant struggle that you think you're doing good, and one little break suddenly pushes you over the cliff again. So after that, I got back to Utah, and that's kind of where my story started taking a turn. I got really lucky. I was able to break that cycle, and now as I'm sitting here tonight, I just recently left the Salt Lake Community College. I spent 2.5 years working in their Disability Resource Center. Longest I've held a job in, like I said, over 20 years. And I left on my terms. I actually left because I'm starting a new job next week where I'll, be making some more money, working full time, and it's a great opportunity. So I made that decision, but it was on my terms. So that's not all. I'm also now on the board of directors of a local mental health nonprofit that I'll talk about momentarily. I serve on the Salt Lake City Accessibility and Disability Commission, and I'm an accreditation member for an international mental health organization. And all that's just been in the last 4 years. So how did I get there? How did I break that cycle? Why am I not, going through that same hoop that I've been going through most of my life? Well, I was really lucky in 2019 when I moved back to Utah. I started going to this program here locally. It's just a couple blocks away from here, actually, and it's one of the sponsors of tonight. It's called the Alliance House, and it's just this really unique mental health program. It follows what's called a clubhouse model, and it's a psychosocial rehabilitation program that really focuses on all of our members' strengths, talents, abilities. It focuses on that rather than the diagnosis. We really have a saying of leave your diagnosis at the door. It doesn't matter if you're bipolar or schizophrenic or dealing with depression. Can you pay the bills? Can you help us cook lunch? Can you go speak at an event? I think that there's a lot of other really unique things about that program. But overall, it wasn't necessarily just having that program and the education, employment, and housing opportunities that broke the cycle. It's that Alliance House is a community. We all are, dealing with the same thing. Everyone there has some sort of mental health diagnosis. And it makes it to where all of us really understand, relate to, and support us, each other, and support each other. So briefly, I just want to give a shout out to a few of my friends that are out in the crowd from Alliance House, and give them a round of applause, because they're all doing great too. So my story is like many others with mental health challenges, that cycle. And you really have to find a great way to break that cycle. Whether it's, the Clubhouse or Mental Healthy Fit or other organizations. But that's not all. Really the key item, one second. So, really one of the important things to remember is that, yes, right now, I've been good for 3 years. I have a great community, great support structure behind me. I'm doing big things, but I'm not gonna lie and say that, oh yeah, I'm cured. I'm good now. I know there's gonna be struggles, even in these 3 years there has been. Because mental health's a thing that'll never go away. If someone had diabetes, you wouldn't say, oh, when are you gonna be cured? When you're gonna be, you have to maintain. You have to keep doing the things that keep you stable, keep you healthy. So the other thing I would want to say is, the key thing really for us, whether you're in here that you're supporting or an ally or just an advocate, is that we really need to support those programs that do help those in need. Now that means we need more advocacy for funding. We need more events like this to help break that stigma so people aren't afraid to talk about mental health. And we really need, most of all, we need you, all of you out in the audience, to get involved, do the work, help grow the mental health movement. Let's beat mental health. Though we can't cure it, we can beat the stigma. And then we also, of course, need to work on getting, affordable and free health care, because that's such a valuable asset, whether it's going to certain programs like I talked about, or hospitalized, or just medication. All of those play a part. So with that said, I'll just say, are there any questions anyone has? And when it comes to the Alliance House, I literally could, spend the rest of the night talking about it. It's an amazing program. But if you want to see me about that afterwards, I'd be happy to talk to you a bit. We are located at 1724 South Main. We do tours every day at 11 or 2. And like I said, it's open to anyone with a mental health diagnosis. So if you or someone you know might benefit from something like that, we'd love to have you come down and see what we're all about. But other than that, I'll take any questions.
Do you have to be diagnosed, or can you be in the process of getting diagnosis?
So that's a pretty cool question. So it is a very low barrier program. So we do require a diagnosis, but really that is you can even get it like 4th Street Clinic after one visit. It's not like you have to have like an ongoing, hey, I've been seeing this person for a while. The other cool part is we will bill Medicaid, but if you don't have Medicaid or you're insured through another source or just completely uninsured, then we have an access program to pay for that. So there's no necessary payment or anything. I've never seen a bill, so that's another cool part. But really, when we say any adult living with mental illness, we try to live to that. And there are times where our executive director is the only clinician in the program. And she, at times, if someone has no other resource to get that diagnosis, can actually meet with someone and do a diagnosis. Because in the clubhouse, like I said, we leave our diagnosis at the door. We also leave all the traditional mental health stuff at the door. We're not doing groups. We don't do therapy. We help run the program. We, like I was saying, pay the bills, cook lunch, do all these other really amazing things. And it's more focused on what we can do, not, beating our mental health challenge. Any other questions?
Where's it located?
And so it's at 1724 South Main Street. So that's actually where the Alliance House is. However, like I said, Clubhouse International, it's an international standards-based organization that does the accreditation for all these independent clubhouses. There's about 340 of them around the world on every continent other than Antarctica. And we actually do have 5 here in Utah. So there's also one in Tooele, one in Davis County, one up in Park City, and one down in Utah County. And we have one that's starting the accreditation process down in southern Utah in St. George. Others. Looks like that's it. So I just want to thank everyone for the support and for what you guys are doing by showing up to events like this. Keep advocating for mental health. And for those that might be struggling with mental health, there is a way that you can break that cycle. You really rely on that support network that you have, rely on friends, family, and find that community, because I think community is really the key aspect to helping, to break that cycle. Thank you.